Let's be clear. Yes, that's the name of the show, my friends. In a world of fuzzy thinking, in a world where political correctness rules and fuzzy thinking leads the day, we need to cut through these things. If America is ever to be America, whether it be great again or again great, we're going to be clear on these things. We're going to have conversation between ourselves as Americans, and some of these things are going to be sticky. Some of these things will be tricky, and I encourage everybody, let's not go into it with our chip on the shoulder or our emotions so easily to be ruffled. Let's go into it and hear the other side. Wouldn't that be different? Actually listening to people. So this is what we're trying to do, where we're cutting through fuzzy thinking. And let's be clear is the name of the show. And my name is State Senator James Sanders Jr. And I love clarity. And towards that end, we are going to tackle some shows here that nobody else will go near. In fact, let's start with this one. The results are in. The election was held, and regardless of whether you're happy with it or sad with it or don't think it's over or believe it was over before it started, we need to be clear. The results say that 19% of black men who voted, mind you, who voted for the current president, Donald Trump. 19%. Rounding that off, that's 20%. My friends, that's one out of every five. One out of every five black men who voted for Donald Trump. Now, if these figures stay, and I believe that they will stay, we're digging into what these things mean. If these figures stay, then we need to figure out what is this telling us? Are the 19% or the 20% right? They voted right, but are they right or are they wrong? Are they seeing something that the 80% don't see? Are they just strays who just went wandering and somebody needs to give them a session, a come to Jesus, Moses, or whoever you believe session where we say, what are you doing? Is it that, as the now president says, that anybody black who didn't vote for Trump is not black? What are we saying? We need to be clear. And I have some great guests today, and that's a transition, Mr. Barnett. I have some great guests today, and they are going to really help us. We are delighted that we have two people with us. Three, I believe we have Assembly Member Taylor on the line, and we'll hear from him. He'll be the third, a disembodied voice there, but that's all right. His spirit is oh so strong. Um, Mr. Barnett is the senior policy advisor to the New York State Republican Party, and he has several other titles. And I have done him a great disservice by only saying that title, but he will show his Christian charity and try to forgive me. It will take a lot of it, but I'm betting that he has it. Mr. Barnett, good to see you on the show. So you're here to explain why those folk were wrong with voting for Donald Trump, aren't you?
Well, you know what? The good thing about our country is that, we're diverse people, and diverse people have diverse thoughts. And with those diverse thoughts, there's a different thought process, a different emphasis on what is important to the individual, not as a herd, so to speak, or cohort. So I think what you saw, or what we all witnessed during this election, is, finally a certain part or demographic within the Black community, not just regionally, but nationally, chose to focus more so, in my opinion, on economics, on financial matters, on business, and so forth. And everything that I'm saying is pre-COVID, right? Because no one is we haven't done a post-mortem on the impact of COVID yet. But when you look at not only the continuation of the downtrend and low unemployment levels in the Black community, not just nationally overall, but those are historic numbers. And then the allocation to HBCUs in terms of historic funding and permanent funding. And then when you add really the First Step Act, the first piece of legislation that chose to address the huge disparities and cruel punishment in many respects that our criminal justice system actually took upon itself through the passing of the 94 crime bill. Up until now, nothing had been done until 2018. So the First Step Act, don't quote me, but approximately 25,000 Black men, mostly Black men and Black women and Hispanics and so forth, actually came home by having their sentences commuted. So that's huge. We saw that in commercials. We saw that in various anecdotes on various shows. We saw that in publications. So it was actually real, something that was tangible, and something that I think Black men particularly could relate to. So that's a real experience. That's not driven by, oh, I don't like that person or I like this candidate better. That's a real life experience. And I
But Mr.
think
Burnett, can it also be said that part of that economic boom that you speak of started under the Obama administration? And can it also be said that that President Trump, with his hostility towards the movement known as Black Lives Matter, and but even deeper, lack of sympathy to any of the victims of these heinous police killings, couldn't that be said as factors why they shouldn't have voted that way?
so. Let's look at the numbers in the impact of policy. This is not an attack on President Barack Obama. It's just a reality. Um, it just didn't actually reach down to the urban neighborhoods like they wish it had. Whether you talk about Chicago, New York, or elsewhere. Sure, the unemployment numbers went down, but many people, as what was reported over the last several years, actually had stopped looking for gainful employment. So they weren't even factored into the numbers. So technically, the unemployment rate was much higher under Obama, the actual unemployment rate or the underemployment rate. Then when you look at wage growth, wages were not growing over the last several years with the passing of the tax bill and other economic activity with respect to opportunity zones and other investments. The bottom 47% actually their income outpaced the top percentage of income earners. One of the first time in the last 50, 60 years. So that's material financial impact. At the same time, having a robust job market brought people that had given up or actually working two part-time jobs back into the labor market for gainful employment at attractive wages.
What
That's
about the president's
that's real impact.
perceived uh, hostility towards this community, its women, especially taking issue with many of their women? What do you? How do you explain that, sir?
Well, the thing is, that you're switching lanes, and that's no problem. It's your show. But I was really focusing on the finance and economics, right? Many times we for as a people, we voted based upon the honey to the ears.
Okay.
But honey to the ears often led to lint in the pockets.
Okay.
So when you look at the clear separation and divide between Black men and Black women and how they voted in this election, Black men actually focused more so on the financial elements and the economics, not the tweets and not the statements. Case in point, I actually canvassed in West Philly, and it was at some risk, right? But hey, I'm a preacher's son, so I
Yeah.
believe in evangelizing, right?
Well,
So
God
so
bless
I
you.
went so I went to West. Well, I prayed right before I went. So I went to West Philly and I started engaging folks. And one Black man said, looked like he was middle aged. He said, I don't vote. I don't, participate in the electoral process. I said, okay. And I continued engaged. He said, you know what? Look, I don't have a dog in the fight. But if I did, I'm not sure who I would vote for. But I'll tell you one thing, no one has been able to answer this question for me. He said, what policies of Trump's was wrong? He said, forget about the tweets and what comes out of his mouth. His policies actually empowered Black people.
Well, we may hear about that in a moment, sir. Uh, or you may have won him over, but I'm speaking about Mr. Richard H. Schaefer, who is the Suffolk County Democratic Chair, and he's also the town supervisor for the town of Babylon. Now, Mr. Schaefer, I believe that Mr. Barnett has won you over, and that you are ready to switch parties now, and
I'm
we
ready to
all
actually just jump off the podcast. I'm done. I don't.
well, it's he's already won you over.
I would what that first senator. Thank you for having me today, and I've heard a lot of great things about the work that you've done during your term as senator, and I'm glad to be on the call today with John because I can tell you just from what I've heard of John, he makes very good presentation about supporting his candidate, supporting his position, and I think he's somebody that I'm glad to see is involved in the political process. What I would say is that my definition of leadership, and leadership is something, I've been in elected office since 1987, and I've been in the political world since I'm about 11 years old. My history has been political involvement throughout. And the one thing I learned is that I understand policies are policies. And so a piece of paper with a policy written down means something. But I really think you've hit the nail on the head, Senator, by bringing up the fact that we've had a leader in Trump, and that's why I believe at the end of the day will be shown as to why he lost, is he couldn't get out of his own way of his ego. And he allowed his ego to dictate how he responded to people. And I think, quite frankly, the fact that a large segment of the population felt that he not just didn't want to listen to them, but disliked them, the fact that a large segment of the population felt that is something that we've never experienced in our country. Whether you go back to a George Bush, the first or second, Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, all of the presidents, and I've known presidents, been realizing presidents since Lyndon Johnson. I was born, in fact, a couple of days before Kennedy was assassinated, but I have a recollection of Lyndon Johnson. But I never saw somebody who would be as disrespectful and really dismissive, where people felt that he wasn't their president. And that to me was symbolic of why I believe, and I think at the end of the day, when we look at these final numbers, and I'll go with final numbers, because we've seen in New York right now that on the machine vote, most of the Republicans voted on election day or in the early voting that New York has made available now. But on the paper vote, we are winning as Democrats. We're seeing, and these are people who voted on the paper ballot, Democrats, Republicans, blanks, no party. And we're winning 73 to 75% of those ballots, including Republicans. So I think you may see your number drop a little bit, maybe not a lot,
Interesting.
but I would say that I think Trump is an excellent salesman, and he was able to present himself well, where you grab, as you said, black males, maybe a higher percentage of black males who would normally have not voted for the Democratic candidate. But I think overall, the fact that the Democratic candidate is going to get 80 to 85% of a particular category of people speaks volumes to why, at the end of the day, when they write the book on Trump, it's going to be that maybe some of his policies were good, and I would have to tend to agree. Some of the things he advanced were good and productive, but his own ego, the fact that he couldn't attend John Lewis's funeral, I mean, that just, from a symbolic standpoint, some of the basic things you learn in American government are that the president is supposed to be a healer. The president is supposed to be someone who can wrap his arms or her arms around the general population and make them feel better in a time of need. And the fact that someone as iconic as John Lewis, whether you agreed with his policies or not, you attend that funeral. But by not attending it, by being nasty and by being disrespectful in your comments about him, says to a whole group of people, I don't really care what you think. And again, that's why I think you didn't have 80 to 85% of the whites voting for Trump. You had a difference of opinion there. But in terms of black males, if it's 20%, I'll go with it. I think it's going to be lower. But at the end of the day, I think it's because of his own. And I think that that's very important. I think that you can look at his policies, but I think at the end of the day, if you don't think somebody likes you and somebody cares about you, in fact, somebody dislikes you and is being negative about you, I think that sells that closes the deal, and that's why you've seen the results that you've seen from the black community.
Well, you've made an excellent point, Mr. Schaefer, and the votes are not fully tallied. It is true. So just as we've seen leads vanish when all of the votes are counted, and incidentally, we've seen our president call for counting all of the votes and not counting all of the votes, or counting all the votes in some places and not. Well, there I go thinking. But Mr. Schaefer, um, regardless of if the number 20% or is the number 10%, that's still a sizable amount of a population, sizable amount of a specific, a subset, the black men.
Sure.
What put yourself in another roles. Put yourself in Mr. Burnett's role, and I'm working on it. I'm working. Uh, put yourself in his role, and what? Why would these black men vote for Trump if they did vote for Trump?
Look, I think what John said is correct in that why do people do what they do? Why does somebody look, you've been in elected office for a number of years, I've been in elected office. Why is somebody going to support Rich Schaefer? Well, they're going
Mm.
to want to know what Rich Schaefer has done for him or her. And so John makes the point, and I would agree. And I know some of the things he advanced in terms of either policies that were changed or if a black male feels that he's doing much better than he was, the famous Ronald Reagan question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Again, you make the point, Barack Obama and Joe Biden were bringing us out of the '08 crash and really worked hard to get the economy back up and running. And did we see the results of their work during the Trump administration? Well, you can't take any of the credit away from Donald Trump if some of his policies have advanced and made it better. So I believe everybody makes their decision on voting for what do they feel the person or persons have done for them. And so if there are these programs that have been made available that black males have seen changes that were made, then that's what they responded to. And we're going to have to drill down and do a better job as the Democratic Party to make sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing what they said they were going to do and continue that improvement in, and again, pocketbook is the main, have you raised my taxes? No, then we like you. Have you put more money in my pocket? Yes, then we like you. So it's all about what have you done for me lately? And so Biden and Harris are going to have to continue to perform and do what they said they were going to do. But I think that the result has changed because of what they saw Trump and his team did.
Well, before we hear from you again, Mr. Burnett, I believe that Harlem is in the house. I believe that the assemblymen from Harlem, often that place is often known as the Black Mecca itself. The assemblyman from Harlem is here, and if he unmutes himself, we may hear from Assemblyman Al Taylor. So, Mr. Taylor, we're speaking, Assemblyman, we're speaking about 20% so far. We don't have the final figures, but preliminary figures say 20%, close to 19 actually. 20% of black men, uh some say flew the plantation, left the plantation.
Oh man.
Some
Oh
say,
no,
listen,
no.
I'm just saying what it's been said. Some say, lost their minds. Some say voted for Donald Trump. First things first, Mr. Taylor, were you one of those 20%?
No, not at all, with no remorse. In fact, I share with one of my good Bible toting I love Jesus constituents. I'd rather be dead in my grave than to have to vote for that man. Now, I know people made decisions based on whatever narrative they found themselves in. I think there are some policies and things that the president did do well. But I think if you're going to be the president for the entire nation, then you have to represent the entire nation. I liken some of his behavior to our good friend, Governor George Wallace, and how strong he was as supporting segregation. When you look at the lack of his presidentialcy, if you would, that disturbed me greatly. And I'm not saying that people did not, could not, should not vote for him, but I found that a hard pill to swallow. I don't know that these numbers will reach 20%, but if it does, it's not the end of all end. And hey, John, it's good to see you also. I can't get on, but I can see you guys. So it's good to see you, John, a fellow Harlemite as well. So I think the proof is that historically, there's always been a contingency of people that vote. I mean, the very fact that we have the eloquent John Burnett as a Republican that has articulated great information here this afternoon, there's nothing wrong with being a Republican. There's nothing being with a right to life or a Democrat or part of the marijuana party. Wherever you find a narrative that works for you, you get in where you fit in. And I think when we look at people, Senator, that may have voted and the numbers seemed a little higher than before, I mean, you have to look at it and say, well, how did this happen? Even the very fact that when you look at Trump's loss, 172 million for him, 175 for Joe Biden, but yet the people on the downside of that ticket still won. So there was a split amongst the regular folks going back and forth. So you had Republicans that may have voted for Democrats, and certainly more Democrats. There were less Democrats voting for Republicans, I think, traditionally. So and you have these two races coming up in Georgia that's going to determine where we're at. But I don't know that we should give a lot of and ooh to how many people actually voted, as much as there is a conversation afoot. And I think that's what's important. There is a conversation. And what can we do better as a country? What can we do better as citizens? And what can we hope to do as a nation? And I think anytime you have someone like former Congressman John Lewis, whether you didn't like anything about him, just common decency says, I want to present this face. That face that our president, in my estimation, has presented has been the same one that rose him to triumph in 2016 when you had the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement. And even then, he showed no consideration or conciliatory toward victims, but it was always police, police, police. And in certain communities of color, that's a hard pill to swallow. But in other places, it's okay. You know, police are there and they believe what says on the side of the car to serve and protect. That's not the narrative in the inner cities in most of the places. And I think when you allow yourself to just think how others are possibly feeling, consider the possibilities. And when you look at Brother Floyd, almost 9 minutes on the ground with a knee to his neck, is there any part of this man's heart that's not made out of steel? And that's what's questionable for a lot of folks.
Well, Mr. Again, wait a minute, Mr. Assemblyman, brother Assemblyman. It was not Donald Trump that said anybody who votes for Donald Trump is not black. That didn't come from Donald Trump. That came from the other gentleman, I believe.
Say that part again.
It was Joe Biden who decided for blacks who would be black and who wouldn't be black if they voted for Trump, wasn't it? Is that
Yeah,
Joe
yeah.
Biden
And
has
I had
that?
a problem. I had a problem with that too. Now, having said all of this, we have not arrived. We are
Okay.
far from having arrived. There's been a lot of, I'm going to straight up call it, since we're on this kind of conversation, a lot of shucking and jiving, and we've been hoodwinked too many times to go to the polls, to get excited and do that. And then we don't have boots to pull ourselves up with. The trickle down theory doesn't work in our community, and there may be some that are gleaning the benefits of some of those impacts, but unless Joe Biden really does some great stuff, we could find ourselves in the same narratives we've been in historically, unless there's some real work. What about restitution for spending X amount of years in slavery? I mean, we've given it to everybody else around the globe, but we've not given it to the people that built America. So Joe's there and he's got to pony up in a big way, not thank you and smile and get. I don't want honorable mention. I want transformation in my community down to the lowest level. And with this COVID-19, we're doing different looks. So what does job readiness and preparedness look like on the front line for those that are not going to school or in school and coming out?
So, Mr. Burnett, in the last days of the Trump administration, we should see him come out in favor of reparations, you're saying?
The thing is, Assemblyman Taylor said a lot, but I just wanted to just add a couple of things, if you don't mind, before I answer your question. A lot of things could be lost in noise and certain media narratives, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that it was the president that sent DOJ resources immediately to Minneapolis to investigate it, and he clearly expressed that it was a horrible video, and I don't think there was an ounce of separation, whether you're white, black, whether you're Republican or Democrat. I didn't hear anyone support what transpired in Minnesota. So while there's a lot of people using that narrative to divide us, and I'm not saying that you are, Assemblyman, there wasn't an ounce of daylight between how people saw it. So in
Can I
terms
add
of,
in right there?
If you
sure.
could do it fast, because I have a question for myself, but please, Assemblyman.
Hey, John, thank you so much. My concern was when you have these type of incidents that happen in communities of color, it's not just that incident, it's the totality of those events that bring it to the boil. And his response in some of those communities also was, let me send the military in there. Let me silence this. Let me protect a building versus property versus the lives of somebody. And I have problems with that.
I'd have to disagree with you respectfully.
Absolutely.
Because shortly after, again, similar to the First Step Act, we've never had police reform. And while some people might say, well, qualified immunity was still left in or whatever, that might be a disagreement as far as whether it should be in or should not be in. But he actually tried to get police reform done and said it was important and actually spoke about it. Simultaneously, I know people that were there visiting and knew people there. There were Black businesses being burnt down. So it wasn't just the Target and the Walmart. We have to protect our communities because those same individuals, Black individuals, some may not have access to good transportation or access to good stores other than the ones that are in the neighborhoods, right? So there was a need to protect property and businesses, because once you lose that economic element and jobs and so forth, there was an issue. So I saw it as actually addressing both, getting police reform done, right, or trying to, and at the same time, not letting police stations being burnt down, businesses being burnt down, and dive into utter anarchy. And I think we could both agree on that. We might not agree, and I think we can also agree that everything that how he says it and what he tweets is not how we would do it. So I think we're in agreement there. But Senator Sanders, you wanted me to address reparations, or you had another question?
Well, I have a different question, and then we'll hear from Mr. Schaefer. But you spoke of the DOJ resources, Department of Justice resources
Right.
that the president had sent in. I was wondering, did that include his Proud Boys? Was that part of the resources that he sent into the different places, or were
Well,
they still standing down waiting on his further orders?
Even New York Times and those leftist papers actually reported the fact that the president sent DOJ, which includes the FBI, there to do an investigation. As you know, normal practice would let the state and local officials run the course of their investigation, but he didn't wait for that. Why? Because again, there was no degree of separation. You had Fox News, CNN, you had black, white, you had Republican and Democrat, right? And even the politically agnostic saw that video the same exact way. And when you look at even situations that happened under Obama, because this is not a new phenomenon, right? Usually, again, the practice or the pattern is the federal government waits until the locals do their investigation and so forth. But he did not wait for that, because again, that was obvious, wrong, or the optics of wrong, right? Even if you were that person, that supported police, there was even sheriffs and heads of department around the country. I saw one tweet. He said, "Look, if you're a man or woman in law enforcement, and you don't have a problem with that video, turn in your badge now." So you even had law enforcement take issue with that video.
So he did not send in the Proud Boys. He just has them chasing after buses and perhaps nudging them off the street at this moment. He does not have them encourage them to do these things.
I don't think anybody, whether it's an all white neighborhood or all black neighborhood or a mixed neighborhood, we should not tolerate this order where people are committing arson, burning down communities, because that leads to other violence and other acts.
You're including the Proud Boys in that, I trust.
I'm including Antifa. I'm including Black Lives Matter that engage in destruction of property. Anyone under any label, any color, that destroys a neighborhood, right? Because there was Antifa and BLM, not just BLM. It was black and whites burning down and engaging into destruction of property. But the narrative is always, sending in the National Guard to go against black people. Well, when you look at Minneapolis in the videos, there was just as many white people. In some instances, I saw more white people there than blacks.
Now, you're ignoring, sir, the FBI reports and others that have said that the majority of the violence has come from the right wing, the Proud Boys, the Klan, the Nazis, and those kind of guys. And there's been precious little and no documented evidence against the Black Lives Matter. And Antifa is not a group, of course. It is a movement. There are people who have all kinds of views and very, according to the FBI, not some leftist group, they're saying that these guys are not. I'm going to let you come back, Mr. Burnett, okay. But I did not have Mr. Schaefer. I had him in here. You've heard a bunch of stuff, Mr. Schaefer.
Heard a lot.
You can respond wherever you want to fit in.
Well, I'm gonna get back to, I think, something that the assemblyman said, and that is that what a lot of this comes down to is having a leader who is there to lead and bring together the country. I mean, I'm exhausted from the past 4 years, and it isn't just COVID exhaustion, but I'm exhausted from how this person and the president has spent a lot of time, I believe, by his actions, figuring out how to keep people divided. I think his ego is the type of ego that only feels he can succeed as a leader when he's got everybody divided. And he relishes the fact that he's got all this because he feels he gets his power from keeping people divided. And that really isn't the type of leader that I've been, on a local level for the past 30 years. And I don't think it's what you've done, Senator, as well. And I don't think it would be what Mr. Burnett would do as well. Listening to him today, I think he's a very reasoned, has a very reasoned approach to being a leader. And I think he makes some good points as well and when you did look at the video, a lot of it was done by a lot of the burning down or the vandalism was done by a lot of white people as well. So it wasn't, but the president didn't speak out about that because he was almost, and you can tell someone's body language, almost hesitant. Even in the debate, we all saw him not be able to shut down the Proud Boys movement. And we saw how he just kind of, recoiled back and he wasn't going to take on his loyal supporters. Well, those are people that nobody should want supporting them. And he should have spoken out very forcefully about that. So again, I get back to my whole thing is I judge a person by their character, by how they treat other people, by how they speak about other people, both spoken and unspoken, how they act toward other people. And this just, again, as the assemblyman said, he said he'd rather be dead than having to be forced to vote for someone like Donald Trump. I would tend to agree with that because of, although I don't want to be dead, I would say that really,
I heard you guys vote whether you're dead or alive anyway.
But that's only by mail, sir. That's only by mail.
But I want to make the point on Georgia. If you take a look at Georgia, and for the first time since Bill Clinton '92, did Georgia go for a Democrat? And that was because, and if you take a look at the breakdown of Georgia, it was because of the Black community.
But wait a minute, Mr. Schaefer, wait a minute. We still are not getting to an issue here, and I'm gonna put it to you. Maybe these other guys are too stuck and they can't answer it. We'll pretend it's just us on the phone for a second, Mr. Schaefer.
Sure.
How on this planet can Black men vote for somebody who is very comfortable with the Proud Boys and that segment of America? How can 20% at this moment vote for them?
Look, I can't speak for Black men. I can't speak for the Black men who voted.
Everybody else does. Why not you?
What I will say is again, and you'd have to go person by person to hear why they would vote for somebody like that. And again, I don't think that I could support somebody who, like, spoken and unspoken, just was very disrespectful. In fact, at times you could see the hate that he felt for a particular class of people. And I don't know how somebody could do that. You'd have to ask them and see why they did what they did. But I find it very surprising as well. When Ivan called me to be on the show, and he said, "Here's the premise of the show," and I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "We have figures that show a certain higher percentage voting for Trump." And I said, "Well," I said, "he's a good salesman and he knows how to look. He ran a successful TV show for years. He's had questionable successful businesses. But I think, again, he may have gotten through to a few people who bought his line of, and you can fill in the blank from there."
Well, since you raised it and alluded to it, then we'll do just that. Let's ask a Black man.
There you go.
Assemblyman Taylor.
Harlem is in the house.
Assemblyman
I didn't vote for him.
Why did you say that you did not, and we'll take your word that you did not. I have heard reports otherwise, but let's say, why did the guy right next to you in the voting booth, why did he vote for Donald Trump? Don't laugh, Mr. Burnett. You're next.
No, I think what we want to always be kind, and that's what has made these United States what they are. It allows people to have democracy and do whatever their narratives best prescribes for them. So that person that voted for someone separate from what I would have voted for has everything under the Constitution of these United States to do. And I think if we're not careful, we could find ourselves not in this discussion, but we can perpetuate that separatism that has been there all along. And by that, in the same households, folks were sitting down and having dinner, hopefully small circles. They are a mixed group of people. They are as diverse as there are colors in a box of crayons, but they also represent different parties as well. So I could be having dinner with my brother or my auntie who's a Republican or whatever, but we don't love them any less. It's just that they see the glass half full. We may see the glass half empty, but it's what we are in America, and it allows us to do it. I can't think in good conscience why someone would do X versus Y, but when they look at their what's what I'm looking for? When they look at their narrative and where they're at on in terms of the pecking order, it may make good sense for them to say, well, no, I like this policy. I'm listening to what's not said. And I appreciate John sharing. And I just believe that if this president would have spent more time at least sounding conciliatory, it helps the medicine go down a lot better. And I didn't see that a lot. And it has a tendency, I think he said, honey to the ears is lint in the pocket or something like that. I can certainly appreciate that. But he didn't sound inviting. It was us four and no more. If you're part of this, then you're in. And whatever percentage, it would be interesting to know what percentage of blacks, of those 15, 20%, whatever that number is, look at them. Who are those folks that voted? And I think you're going to find they weren't part of the group that was marching and demonstrating peacefully. We've seen videos of people that look like other folks in our community masked up, busting windows and doing those things. And in fact, one of these young ladies posted, and she said, why are you all doing that? And when the people turned, they were all in black. And when they turned, there were two white young ladies, and they were destroying property. So part of what was happening was you had people, as they say on the block, putting batteries in the backs of other people. They were insightful in doing things that were contentious, and it was being attributed to another group that had nothing to do with it other than they were marching. And I witnessed this on 125th Street in Harlem at one of the first demonstrations. I arrived and I'm like, wow. I wasn't going to go, but my colleagues in government were there. Assemblywoman Inez Dickens, and the crowd was full, and we were in front of the state office building. And my ex-military training says that what I wanted to do was step back and just walk the peripheral. And what I saw were a lot of angry white people. And as people were speaking, the white folks that were angry, like, we didn't come in to hear that. We want to be like, I'm like, well, what in the hell? You know, it's like, what's going on here? I'm not in Kansas anymore. And it's that agitation that precipitated, I think, a lot of some of the stuff that happened. I'm not saying everybody was innocent, but there were more people that didn't come from the communities that were there leading the bandwagon in some of this destruction to paint the narrative that there's anarchy and chaos. It didn't happen in Harlem. Myself and a few clergies, we walked through these communities. I know they shut it down in other parts of the city, but there were people there that made their bones by doing this. So it was a plant all along.
Now I'm going to shift the conversation back because I think we do damage to the black men who voted either way here, because they are larger than whoever did whatever in the streets. I'm going to let Mr. Burnett have his, man, I'm going to work at this one. I think it's a plot. He's going to respond, and then everybody's going to have 30 seconds to give their closing. So Mr. Burnett. We can do this, Burnett. Carol.
Burn it, burn
So,
it, burn it.
yeah, I'm trying to do this. Um, is this temporary insanity on the part of these black men? Is this temporary sanity on the part of these black men? Is this this a growing trend that we will see in the future? Is this a flash in the pan of some folk who thought they were voting for The Apprentice, or what is this?
Well, before I answer that, let me just, Assemblyman Taylor said a lot in terms of, what white folks did during some of these demonstrations. I'll leave the answer in terms of for white folks to Rich. I think Rich can handle that. But in
You are
terms
not going to
of,
make him out Howard Token. Go ahead.
but in terms of, as you know, I have a business background, and I appreciate all the compliments that everyone gave me when I run for statewide office. I look forward to your vote and your check. But with regard to why did they go for Trump? I think you might find the same answer to that question that we found with the groups of white folks in middle of America that voted for President Barack Obama twice, then turned and voted for President Trump in 2016.
Okay.
Right? So
what is that answer?
it may actually grow.
Economic.
Right? It may move from side to side. We don't know. But I think people are actually looking at things with less emotion and more strategically. When you look at, Apple actually came out with a new chip, right? Its own proprietary chip. But before that, and they might still, from a risk perspective, still use Samsung chips, right, to some degree. Now, that wouldn't make sense to the average person, right? Because they compete with Samsung on operating system devices. They sue each other for IP, but they also do business with each other. So from a strategic mindset, okay, you may not like XYZ in certain things, but if there are certain benefits that come out of it, you're able to say, you know what, let's do a risk reward analysis, right? And secondly, let's look over the last 30 years. What Republican, or even going back to the 1960s, what Republican candidate actively spoke about Black issues and actively mentioned certain elements in the Black community during rallies or in other speeches, and said and actually delivered on policy, promises made and promises kept? So I think a lot of people are saying, like, wow, this is the first time. And when you look at the data, he got more votes than any other Republican president since 1960. Will that continue? It all depends upon the candidate that comes up. If they don't actually go out and actively compete for the vote and show up, because you guys know, many times it's about showing up. If you don't show up, and if you don't actually put, people's issues into your narrative, a lot of times they won't actually, give you a thought. So yeah, Biden got 80%, but that 20%, however it ends up, should be alarming, not just the Democrats, but also Republicans. We need more competition across the board. And I think, speaking as a Republican in the minority, I guess I'm a triple minority, right?
Yeah. Very endangered.
Republican, all these different things,
Very
right?
endangered.
So the thing is, we have to learn to work together, and hopefully we can work together on legislation over the next couple of years, right here for people in New York, as well as, if Biden goes from projected to elected, then I think, we need to figure out ways that we can work together, like the infrastructure bill and otherwise. And if Trump pulls this out by the courts or whatever the case may be, we got to be prepared to say, you know what, let's put our political youth in our hip pocket, work together, especially after COVID when there's going to be serious rebuilding needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
let me correct you. A friendly correction, Mr. Burnett. A friendly correction. President Trump got the second highest vote in history of America, in American history.
No, I mean, as far as the percentage of the black vote,
Oh, I see you. Okay.
because that was your focal point in terms of the black vote.
Yes.
The
Yes.
highest number of black votes of a Republican candidate for president since 1960.
Yes, I see your point. Well, we're down to the finals, gentlemen, and we're going to have a closing remark. Let me say that all of you have been fascinating. The conversation on camera has been almost as equal to the conversation off camera. And for those who want that one, send 1995 to my blooper series, which I don't have. We're going to hear from Mr. Schaefer. We're going to hear from Mr. Burnett, and we're going to hear from Mr. Taylor in that order. Mr. Schaefer, your last and closing points, and how people can get in touch with all of you.
Sure.
With all of you.
Yep. Thanks, Senator, for having me today. And in terms of my closing thoughts, one is I think John just hit it on the head with, we talk about these Obama voters and who became Trump voters in 2016. I think he talks about what motivated middle America to vote for a black man as president in 2 elections, and then what switched them back to someone who basically is almost 180 degrees opposite Barack Obama in Donald Trump. And I think a lot of it had to do with the campaign itself. But I do think, and we saw it in Suffolk County here, driven by economics and who felt they weren't taken care of after the 2008 crash, who didn't recover as quickly. So I think that's a very valid point and something that needs to be paid attention to by the Democratic Party. I will agree with Assemblyman Taylor in that we had a lot of peaceful marches and protests, some of which I participated in as an elected official in my town in Babylon. And even the police department was very happy with how organizers handled themselves. We didn't have any issues with violence or vandalism, but we did have one where a number of people showed up who were from an agitator group, and they were all white. And they were instigating both the Black Lives Matter group that was there, as well as those who were there to support the police. And it was noted for the press, and we finally got that narrative out there. So I would agree with Assemblyman Taylor that I saw a lot of what he said he saw in walking through his district in Harlem. And finally, if people want to get in touch with me, they can do it by email, which is rich.suffolk@gmail.com. That's rich.suffolk@gmail.com. Or they can shoot me a text or use my cell phone, which is 516-429-3763. And be happy to speak further about this, or anybody watching from Babylon or Suffolk County wants to get involved in the party, reach out if you'd like.
Now, that's very rich of you, sir, and I'm going to explain why. Because Mr. Schaefer is such a committed public servant that he is here on his birthday.
Yeah.
That he is finally.
Happy birthday.
Yes. Happy birthday.
32 years old today.
Well,
on my birthday, I wake up and I say, "How old do you feel?" 32.
Well, we appreciate that you have finally had your third 32nd birthday, and that we appreciate you here.
I remember the governor when he was Andrew. So
now, are you speaking about Andrew or his grandfather that was just there? But I don't know, Mr. Burnett. Save me from myself. You have your last few, but especially explain what is this in your background, the one group, but you can have your last word, then explain the group, and then say how to get in touch with you.
Sure, great. Again, happy birthday, Rich. Now I know why you let the white guy go first. It's okay. It's his birthday. Okay, no problem. I get it. I get
Birthday.
it.
I'm biased, my friends. I'm biased. What do you want?
So, I think, first of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. I appreciate the invite, but I also appreciate the conversation of substance. I think exchange of ideas and the willingness to reach across the aisle and also work together. I think that's something that we don't see as much in Washington, in the House and in the Senate. And I think with everything that's transpired this year with COVID, I think it's important for us. We're all in the same ship as Dr. Martin Luther King said, we all came on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And I think with that said, we need all hands on deck. Mm-hmm. We need to check our political views at the front door, sit down and figure out how are we going to get through this together with some common sense policies and common sense agenda. So I think, some of which what we talked about today, and just that willingness, because we're all individual leaders. And when we come together, we can be leaders in the collective. We have races coming up, undoubtedly be contentious in New York City and statewide in 2022. But I think, if we keep people first, and I think if we actually put, the working class ahead in knowing what real empowerment is, financially, education, it's not all one size fits all. And I think really focus on empowering those who are here in New York, who are suffering right now. And then also figure out what do we do now and how to connect that to the future. I think that's extremely important. One Empire Group is a business consulting company. We focus on growth strategies, process engineering, financing options, and overall development of different businesses. And we also do communication strategies and so forth. So I appreciate you allowing me to say that. And as far as those, in terms of ways that you can actually reach out to me, is John at One Empire Group. That's the number one, empiregroup.com. Or you can send me an email at my office where I volunteer for the NYGOP. That's John at nygop.org.
Well, I like that. I noticed the volume suddenly went down at that moment. But that's all right. We'll figure this.
And actually, all my social media.
Are you muted? Did I do something? I may have done something over here. I think I did it.
So, and then also my Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook handle is at I am John Burnett. I am John Burnett.
I think all of it is clever. I was noticing your logo in the background. Very, very clever. I'm gonna steal it and say I did it. But with that being said, last but never least, my assemblyman who I've grown to know and love, Assemblymember Taylor, who is so powerful that we could not contain a visual image of him, that we were barely able to just have his voice on here, because he would certainly look so good that nobody would even look at me anymore. So I had to make sure he didn't show up. So, Mr. Taylor, what is your closing thoughts, and how do people get in touch with you?
Well, listen, thank you, Senator. I am always so honored to be in your company, and around you. I have to fall way back. I'm almost invisible in your presence. That's why I'm not up on the screen. So I appreciate the kind words. Rich, I want to wish you a happy birthday, man, and many, 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 many more 32nd birthdays, as many as you can have.
Thank you, Senator.
John, it's always good to hear from you, be in a space where you are. And when I was communicating, I was like, man, you guys should reach out to John Burnett. You're going to get real conversation, and it's real. So I admire you, although we don't get a chance to connect as much as we ought to, and we probably should change that narrative. because I think this conversation and more like this conversations needs to take place. Whether it's 15, 20, or 40% that have voted, the end results will come in whoever is the president. We need to not only just because they're the president, but we need to do some groundwork, some community building so that we're not strangers. We are one America. And at the end of the day, if we live on the same block and there are problems in my neighborhood, we're all going to experience those problems until we figure out what do we need to do together to resolve those problems. So I am so happy to have participated in this and learned so much. John, I really look forward to connecting back with you. I always admire you, and you're going to keep it 100. So I am at New York State Assembly, Taylor A at nyassembly.gov. Taylor A at nyassembly.gov. My office is up and operational. We have Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood. My office number is 212-234-1430, 212-234-1430, and I've enjoyed myself immensely. Thank you.
Was second, Assemblyman Taylor, when you said that they're one block, and I thought you were about to say John is a problem of the block, but I'm glad.
Sometimes
that
I
you did
am.
not say that publicly. Although that's what you're telling me
but
privately.
You gotta have me back to talk about reparations, man.
Yes.
Oh, now we're gonna have more of those. That is such a hot conversation.
The time is now.
We're going to have. Now, this, my friends, this is a conversation. You, the audience, if you were tuned in because you thought somebody was going to talk about their mother and this one, that, you got the wrong group. We don't do that here. You want those angry TV commentators, tune in late at night and it'll be huge. I mean, all of that stuff. You're not going to get that here. You're not going to get this anger. You're going to get thought. Right. We don't mind if people are angry. We do mind if you can't say it in an intelligent fashion. Right. You may have a reason to be angry. You may be right, but at least sit down and think it through, write it down if you must, and be able to show it and share it with people. Otherwise, you won't win them over. And don't look to the big words or to the strange words, because I find, get ready, I find it's better to be clear. I find it is much better to not try to be an articulator and just speak clearly. And make sure that folk understand what the issues are and where you stand on them. And that's why I'm thanking these guests that we're here today, really top notch. And again, to Mr. Schaefer, who's celebrating his third 32nd birthday. I'm so happy that you're here. I be here at your 32nd birthday. May it be that good. Maybe I don't want to be there, but that's a different story for a different day. Strike that from the record. So having said those things, I'm really glad that you guys were kind enough to come. My next show is that we're going to bring, and we're going to speak about Kamala Harris. What does Kamala Harris mean to women, to Black women, to Indian women? Why are there some people really saying that this is a major breakthrough? How did this differ from Obama, and all kinds of stuff? And we're going to bring the sisters on, and they're going to, my friends, and I know, when you get the sisters on, you got a conversation, and you better be ready for it. And I hope that you're ready for that conversation. Al thought I was going to get myself in trouble, but no. I've been in the business a little bit, my friends. You got to get a little bit stronger to get me. So having said that, I'm going to end while I still have a job. I thank you all. This has been Senator James Sanders Jr. And as always, I always say, let's be clear.